curtain goes up or the lights go out, whether you like it or not, whether you feel something. And sometimes everything happens. Your heart, your brain, your soul interact together. But it's the experience. It's the spectacle. It's the experience. It's the way that show has been put together. It's the score. I think it's everything that a show needs for it to be successful. The economic impact of the arts and what it means to, particularly the heart of the urban core, which where most of these theaters are, has become so significant. The redevelopment and this revitalization of downtowns across America. I grew up on a street where one side of the street was Italians and the other side were all my black friends. And Mrs. Taylor would make cornbread and Mrs. Nocciolino would make taras. And we'd give them to each other, you know? There was no, my kindergarten class was 6 Italians and 6 black boys. We were all the best of friends. One of them ended up being my roommate in college. We didn't know color. We knew friendships, we knew relationships. We were very dependent on each other. We had very little, but had so much. All of us did. We had a neighborhood that was our family. We had very little family here. My father just had one brother and cousins. But both my parents worked in factories. It's the classic American dream. They came here, they wanted a better life for themselves, and then ultimately a better life for their children. And that happened. Responsibility, community, respect. The things that we articulate now were happening by accident then because of the way we were living. You have a passion, exhaust it. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid. If you want to do something that's that important to you, don't give up on it. Go try it until you figure out you either don't do it well enough, be willing to be honest with yourself, but don't be afraid to make a mistake. It's okay. Take the time to say, well done, thank you. I find it really important to let people know that you care about them. Because if you don't, then you can't get the kind of interaction that you want. You're not entitled to the kind of respect that you want.
This week on American Reel, we bring you 6-time Tony Award winner, Albert Nocciolino. Albert gives us a unique behind-the-scenes look of what it takes to be a producer and presenter of a Broadway show. Albert talks about the secondary ticket market, the subscription model, and the current status of Broadway in New York City. Albert and I also talk about some of the traditional shows like Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis, and also talk about the current hit of Hamilton and the genius of Lin-Manuel Miranda. I hope you like this episode. If so, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter, as well as Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, American Reel TV. I'd like to thank our partners and sponsors, especially Happy Socks, turning an everyday essential into a colorful design item. I'll be wearing Happy Socks each and every episode. And now, without further ado, I bring to you Mr. Albert Nocciolino. Welcome to American Reel. This is Roger Brooks, and today my very special guest is Albert Nocciolino. You are the president and CEO of NAC Entertainment, a diversified entertainment and theater company specializing in the presentation of national touring Broadway shows in several upstate New York cities, as well as select Pennsylvania markets. In addition, you have produced, co-produced, or invested in many Broadway shows on Broadway and national touring shows across the country, including Hello, Dolly, Hamilton, Dear Evan Hansen, Kinky Boots, Ragtime, Driving Miss Daisy, Thoroughly Modern Millie, Guys and Dolls, Annie, Peter Pan, West Side Story, and on and on and on. You are a 6-time Tony Award winner and have been a Tony Award voter member since 1982. You're the founding member and chairman of the National Touring Theater Council and the founding member of the Independent Presenters Network. You are a graduate of the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and serve on several community boards. Albert, welcome to the show, and it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Roger. Who is that guy?
I'm out of breath. Look, I'm so fortunate to have so many blessed people in my life, and you are among them. We've known each other for a long time, and I'm honored to have you here today. And I can't wait to tell your story. But as you know, I'm always amazed when I was doing my research how much you've done over the course of your career. I mean, when you really go back and look at it, there's been so much. I only read half of the list. It's incredible, and for communities in upstate New York, and to have someone of your stature in our community, it's just tremendous. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Roger.
So we are going to get into all the details today about your business. But before we do, why are so many people attracted to Broadway shows? You know, do they feel a need? Do they feel a need in society?
Well, that's a great question. I think that answer has several layers, but I'll start with what I think is a nice story that kind of defines it. I remember Lin-Manuel Miranda, the genius behind Hamilton, speaking to a group. In fact, we had him as a keynote speaker, and he said, you don't remember the first movie you ever saw, but you certainly remember the first Broadway show you ever saw, or the first theater show. What happens when people go to the theater is so different, particularly in today's age, where everything is on a screen in front of you, a phone, an iPad, a TV screen, and theater's live. The experience is different. The emotional interaction that takes place when the curtain goes up or the lights go out, whether you like it or not, whether you feel something. And sometimes everything happens. Your heart, your brain, your soul interact together, but it's the experience. And particularly, I think for young people, when they come to the theater the first time, young people of this generation, because they haven't been exposed to things. We grew up going to concerts. We grew up seeing live events, not so much anymore. And so the experience now is so different for them. And it, ironically, is what's fueling, I think, the tremendous success that Broadway and theater itself is having across the country and across the world. I think in one word, it's really the experience.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with that. I grew up in a household where my parents played a lot of music from the soundtracks of musicals,
Right.
Les Mis, Phantom, you name it.
Right.
So, it was there. We didn't have the money to actually afford to be able to go to New York to go to a show.
Right.
So I didn't experience it until I was later in life. But I do remember Les Mis was my first show. And it was
Mine was Golden Boy with Sammy Davis Jr. with a CYO group. The same year that Joan Namath was a rookie, we got to see a football game and a Broadway show. I will never, ever forget it.
Yeah.
It was the beginning for me of a special experience for me.
And for people that haven't gone, wow, what an opportunity, right? To do something new, do something different, get to a show, whether it's in your local community or in New York or one of the major markets.
Yeah, exactly. And we're blessed as an industry with a lot of family shows today, whether it's Lion King or Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast before that or Wicked. We're young and they're touring the country, and we can talk about that later, but there's so many opportunities for them. And then what's done at the local level with arts organizations and high schools in particular, more high schools doing productions today than there ever was before.
Yeah.
And it's really wonderful to see that that's happening.
Yeah, and some of the talent, even at that young age, is at the local level, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I think that's the most incredible thing about the story, that there are so many talented people, and it's so hard to break into the business. But there's so many different layers where young people can participate in the arts, in theater in particular, and not just as an actor or an actress, but there are many opportunities. But to get all the way up to Broadway and to the top is hard because it is so competitive, and so many people young people particularly wanting to do that.
Yeah. So let's dive into your career a little bit. So can you tell us what's a Broadway presenter or producer? What does that mean?
So there are other terms, I think, that help define what a presenter is. In the concert business, we might say promoter. In Europe, they have a beautiful name for it, impresario. I love that. In the theater business, we call it presenter. It's a little softer than promoter, but in fact, every one of us is doing the same thing. We are the people who bring a show, in my case, a Broadway show, in a promoter's case, a concert, a show to a venue. We pay for the show. We rent the facility. We manage the engagement. We do all the marketing, all the advertising. We hire the local stagehands. We hire the local wardrobe. We staff the building. We market it, hopefully, to a day. Show takes place on a day. We sell an asset that has no life after the curtain goes up or the lights go out. Differently than if you bought tires and if you didn't sell them today. I like to use tires as an analogy because they're stacked up. You don't sell one today, you sell one tomorrow. We cannot do anything with that seat the next day. Very much like the airline industry, the media business. If you're selling TV commercials, hotels, you have 200 rooms, can't sell 400 the next night, you still have 200. So we take that risk. We're the people who say, we're going to bring the show to the community, into the facility, and hopefully when the show starts, we've sold enough tickets so that we can pay everybody and make a profit. Because in the end, it is a business. And so a presenter is that person who does all of that, takes the risk, manages it all, books it, programs it, and hopefully something good happens at the end of the day.
Wow, and I could only imagine there's probably, I'm sure, like any business, a science behind all of that, right? Leading up to that series, to that actual day of the performance.
Right, I like that word, Roger, the science, because what has evolved, particularly if I can just focus on the theater business across the country, is what I call franchises. Because I like to use business terms. I sometimes refer to shows as product. My colleagues don't like that so much, but we built franchises, and what do I mean by that? Across America, there are presenters like myself or performing arts centers who bring a series of Broadway shows. We call them subscription series. The model that's no different than what the operas did for years and the symphonies did. We program 6, 7 shows, sell season tickets. So to use your word, that science means that we've taken it and managed it to a place where we try to marginalize our risk, lower our risk if we can, by getting people to commit up front. But what that has done has ensured that there is a touring industry, has ensured that when producers go around the country, they have somewhere to go. And then in fact, because they're the ones building and making the show, selling them to people like myself. And so that model has evolved wonderfully, which has become the foundation of performing arts centers around the country.
So is this what you refer to as a subscription model?
Subscription model,
Okay.
subscription series.
Okay.
For example, in one of our markets, Buffalo, New York, we have a theater with 3,000 seats. Typically, we play 1-week engagements. Unless it's a blockbuster, which we refer to as shows like Lion King or Wicked or Book of Mormon or Jersey Boys, that come in for multiple weeks. But typically, they're 1 week. We do 8 performances, 8 times 3,000, 24,000 seats. We have 16,000 season ticket holders. We actually have more season ticket holders than the Buffalo Sabres. Wow. So for that 1 week, 16,000 people have said, we're going to come and see every one of your 6 shows this season. And that happens in Cleveland and in Providence and in Los Angeles and Chicago and all across the country. And so you can see very quickly and very easily that those numbers provide for stability.
Absolutely.
And provide for opportunity, and which has all helped the growth of the touring industry, the Broadway industry in particular.
So this is common across the country.
Whole country.
Okay. And I could see that as being a nice buffer. So what percentage would you say is the subscription base to open seats?
Good question. Across most markets now, particularly with Hamilton out there, 65-75% of the capacity of the gross potential is committed to subscription.
That's incredible. So when you book the programs, how do you decide which ones to bring to a market?
Yeah. Can we go backwards first?
Sure.
Process. So what we book is what most often is predetermined for us by the success on Broadway. So let's start there for a second. 80% of Broadway shows that are produced fail, which means they lose 100% of their money. 20% succeed, and within that 20%, not all of them, what we call recoup their capitalization. Again, they use business terms, all of their money. But they run and then they tour. So for those of us that are programming Broadway seasons around the country, what happens on Broadway is really the key. If a show is successful on Broadway, if it sells tickets on Broadway, the producers eventually will want to tour that show. And then it will go across the country in various shapes and forms. As an example, Hamilton right now has a company in New York, one in Chicago, one that's been going between San Francisco and Los Angeles, and one is getting ready to tour a fourth company here, and then one opening in London. That's the anomaly because that doesn't happen very often. But you have an On Your Feet or a School of Rock, just still on Broadway, touring the country, playing 1 week engagements or 2 week engagements. And those shows come to us as a result of how well they've done on Broadway.
Okay,
So,
makes sense.
right. So what'll happen is a show will be built on Broadway, capitalized. Hopefully it works, and then when it does, we see it through the country.
Sure. So how did you get into this business?
Oh, it's such a crazy.
I mean, is this something you ever thought about growing up, or
You
did
know,
you just...
Roger, no. I was actually in drama club as a junior high school student and ushered at a theater in our hometown when Broadway shows would come to town. But then I found sports and realized that I couldn't sing, wasn't very good at acting, but I always had an affinity for it. And then I went off to college and was fortunate enough through financial aid to find myself in a job where I was managing the ticket agency at the university that I went to, and then eventually started booking all the concerts and working with the local organizations, excuse me, in town. As a ticket agency for the students, I would buy tickets to the Philadelphia Eagles. I was in school in Philadelphia Eagles, the Phillies, the Philadelphia Orchestra, and we would buy them and sell them to the students. So I started getting the bug, so to speak, and had actually accepted a job when I graduated with a financial institution in New York City. But my dad was sick, so I came home before I started working and realized that I probably needed to stay home for a little while, and got hired as the assistant manager of a new arena being built in Binghamton, New York, and lasted for about 2.5 years and booked my first show at 23 years old and thought I sold it out.
Do you remember what that show was?
I do. It was Charlie's Aunt with Vincent Price, Roddy McDowell, and Coral Brown. And because I was working, we had just renovated the theater in town, and we were looking for programming, and I had just left. I bought the show, and it sold out. I thought, well, this is easy.
Right.
Little
First
did I know.
time.
And then, a long story short, I continued to do that and saw the model of subscription, which had been around for many years before, and had kind of fallen apart across the country. There were Broadway theater leagues across the country where volunteers and not-for-profits would bring 2 or 3 shows and try to sell subscription. I started that back up again, and not with the kind of success I had with the first show. In fact, lost money in all first 4 shows of that season I put on subscription, but was committed to it. And then started building on it and building it in other markets. And then from there, which we can talk about a little bit, but that vertical integration, I started getting more diversified, more involved. But started with one subscription after doing 1 show, and after putting on concerts in college and working in an arena, and just knew it was in my blood.
And you've been doing this ever since?
Ever since.
First and only job?
First to know
That's
the job. I
awesome.
started my company at 23
That's incredible.
with a
That's incredible.
upside down door and 600 blocks.
So is I know London has a tremendous market for Broadway shows, and of course our country does. But what about around the world? Is it popular around the world?
Yeah, of course, you refer to the West End in London, and nothing is like London and Broadway, where you have 20, 30, 40 theaters. But there are many productions that tour the world, from China to Australia to Germany, Japan. And typically what will happen, they'll have one or two major performing arts centers in those communities, and a show will go and sit there for a long time, particularly the big shows. But yes, there is an international touring theatrical community. I think at one point Chicago was in 10 different cities across the world. Wicked has been in Germany and Japan and London, and The Lion King, and many of those shows have had international productions, but not like we see in London and again on Broadway. But yes.
So London and New York are the two major markets.
Yeah, they're the sit-down theater communities, if you will, where New York has 32 theaters. I'm not exactly sure the West End, I think, has about the same. In fact, I think a little bit more, where shows just play there for 24/7.
Yeah, and I know I talked to you about Hamilton in the past, and just seeing you around. And I think I even sent you a clip of my son.
Yeah.
There's a craze going on with this show, with the young generation, and I love it. And my kids know the words, they love the story, and I mean verbatim. My son could sing Alexander Hamilton, rap it to the T. Right. What do you attribute that to?
I just want to add to your story. I was speaking to a group of students in Rochester, New York, about 50 students. The teacher asked me if I would speak to them. They were all students who were interested in theater and a career in theater, but were not actors. And she wanted me to talk to them about the different professions that they could pursue in the theater business, whether it was a stage manager, an agent, a production manager, a designer, choreographer, whatever. So when we were done, I said, how many of you have been to Broadway? No. I said, how many of you have heard of Hamilton? They all raised their hand. I said, how many of you know the soundtrack? They all raised their hand. They knew the music, they knew the show, they'd never seen it. The last time that happened was in the 50s with West Side Story and Sound of Music, to go to your story, when the music of a show was part of the popular mainstream music, and people knew the songs yet had never seen the show. That hasn't happened since then until now with Hamilton. For me, it's quite simple. It's the way it's delivered. Young people can relate to it. It's history. It's a piece of history. Most kids don't want to talk, don't even want to open a history book,
That's right.
Yet alone know what Alexander Hamilton did in the Caribbean and how he got to America, and they wrap that in the first 3 minutes, as you just said. So the way the show is delivered, the way the show speaks to young people is just extraordinary, and I think contributes to what you've just defined, and that this generation just finding their way to the show.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I'm glad you mentioned that about the 50s, because that was my next question. Is has this ever happened before? I saw a clip on YouTube of President Obama. There was a gathering at the White House, and a couple of the cast members came in and did a couple of the songs. I don't know if you saw this clip, but at least in my experience, watching that clip and seeing the reactions of others, hearing it for the first time, it's so different that first you're saying, is this for real? And then after a couple minutes, you settle in and say, wow, this is amazing. So are you seeing that type of, or did you see that type of response with this show?
Absolutely. In fact, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to the show early on. And one of the productions early on, before we moved to Broadway, when it was downtown, I took my son with me, who was probably 23, 24 then. And he had intermission. He said, "Dad, are you kidding me? This is unbelievable. It's unbelievable." He had not read the book. I had read the book actually several years ago. I knew the story. He didn't know the story. He didn't know anything, but he just loved it. Loved it. Been back to see it again and again. But it does resonate, Roger. And I think it's not just, but people think, oh, it's a rap musical, it's a hip hop musical. It's not just that. There's traditional Broadway ballads in it.
Sure.
There's a beautiful love song. There's what Andy Blankenbuehler did with the choreography, particularly in the scene where there's the duels and how he shows the movement of the bullet through a few dancers. It's just beautiful. And so at many different levels, this show, I think, when people finally see it, just are blown away by it. And it's the music, it's the story, it's the way that Lynn has created this phenomenon, actually.
Yeah, and people are learning from it, which is also a nice bonus.
Exactly.
Again, my kids will be in the car and they'll mention something about the story that relates to history in just conversation, which is really nice to see. So
a side benefit that I don't think anybody actually expected, right?
That's right. So what's the status of Broadway in New York today?
Yeah. Well, Broadway in New York and across the country is on a record-setting pace. It has been for several years. We're selling more tickets, grossing more dollars, more people are seeing shows. More people are seeing shows across the country. We had another attendance record on the road last year. It's healthy. It's healthy. There's a lot of dynamics right now that we're all trying to figure out, particularly the price of tickets. But it's really on fire. We call the theaters real estate in New York, and there's a waiting list of producers trying to get into theaters.
Great sign.
Because they're all full.
Right.
They're all full, and people going, and of course New York's a destination, as you know, and so the substantial part of our audiences in New York come from the international marketplace as well as the domestic market. So a lot of people go to New York. Most people, when they go to New York, part of what they will do when they're there is to see a show.
Right.
So that's become a big part of it.
And do you see it on a steady incline for the foreseeable future?
I do. Of course, we only have so many theaters, so we're not building any new theaters. So that in itself will define where and how far we can go. But I see. Let me answer the question this way: we have more shows now than ever that have been there for a very long time. They're anchored: Lion King, Wicked, Phantom, Book of Mormon, Hamilton now. Here comes Dear Evan Hansen, Come From Away, this coming season, Frozen, Harry Potter. They're going to be around for a long time. And I'm sure I've forgotten a few, but they're there for a long time, and the people, once they're branded like that, they become something that everybody wants to see.
The other thing I'm curious about is why does a show sunset? Why Les Mis being so popular? And I know it came back in a little bit of a different form, but why would something like that sunset?
You talk about history. This is a show about history. That there isn't a spoken word. The whole show is sung. It's an opera, an operetta, right? You love Les Mis. Happens to be one of my favorite shows. But if you think about it on paper, if you were just to read about it, you say, really? French Revolution,
Right.
Operetta? It's the spectacle. It's the experience. It's the way that show has been put together. It's the score. I think it's everything that a show needs for it to be successful. And that show has it all. I mean, it's hard to explain, but you just picked a great show, because this one I don't think anybody would have thought would have had the kind of success, but it's just been playing forever.
In this new form that it's in, did the show, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, did the plot change? Did the music, something?
Just the physical production changed a little bit.
I see.
Yeah, just the physical production.
Okay.
But not anything that you would recognize or that would be different than what you experienced.
Okay, great. Now, the performing arts centers around the different communities around the country, what role do they play?
It's unbelievable what has happened with the arts in general. It's not just talking about theater, but what arts the role that the arts have played in a community. I tell this story, and it kind of, I think, goes back. I remember being at an event in New York City when Cats broke the record as the longest running show on Broadway. And Rudy Giuliani was the mayor at the time.
Yes.
And he was speaking at an event right out front of the theater. He was said, I'm reminded by Jerry Schonfeld. Jerry Schonfeld was then the president of the Schubert Organization, which has 19 theaters on Broadway. And he said, I'm reminded, talk about rap, sometimes I do this, it sounds like rap. I'm reminded if you take the Knicks, the Mets, the Yankees, the Mets, the Giants, the Jets, the Rangers, and the Islanders, and you add up all of their attendance, more people see a Broadway show in New York every week. 250,000 people see a Broadway show every week. Well, what's the importance of that story? And he said, when you go to the theater, you spend your money on the streets. You park your car, you eat in a restaurant, you stay in a hotel. We're sports fans. When you go to a sporting event, where do you spend all your money? In the venue. So let's go back to your question, out on the road. There's a performing arts center. Let's take Cleveland Playhouse in downtown Cleveland, 4 or 5 theaters, hotels, restaurants. You put 3,000 people in the theater. Every restaurant is full. The parking garages are full. The cast and crew are staying in a hotel. The economic impact of the arts and what it means to, particularly the heart of the urban core, which is where most of these theaters are, has become so significant. The redevelopment and this revitalization of the downtowns across America. And with that comes everything else that comes along with that. And so it's a good story. It's a really good story.
Wow. Yeah, no, and we see this all around the country. I remember I lived in Portland, Oregon when I went to college, and I just could remember that it was a downtown campus. It was right near the local theater, and the activity on the night of a show was just incredible. Like you said, the restaurants are full. People are walking around.
I'll tell you a quick story. So the first time I did Phantom of the Opera in Rochester, New York, it was a snowy night, it was opening night, and I was standing back to the stage door with our production manager, and this young man came with a hood over his head, and he said, I want to talk to the promoter. Out of the way, something's wrong here. And I said, well, I'm the presenter. He said, I want to shake your hand. I said, okay. He shook my hand. He said, you see that Midas Muffler store in the corner over there? I said, yeah. He said, I rented it for 6 weeks. I'm parking cars. My family's going to have the best, I couldn't tell the story for a while crying. My family's going to have the best Christmas they ever had. I took all the stagehands and the ushers to Richmond's Bar that second week for chicken wings and beer. And the waitress said, the manager wants to talk to you. So he said, it's on us tonight. He said, this place has been jammed with a crew from the company for the last whatever number of weeks. Those are the things that we don't know even how to measure sometimes, but happen organically.
Right. Yeah, no, it's just a wonderful ripple effect that it has. Kind of staying on the topic of economics, I know New York State now has something called the New York State Theater Tax Credit. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure.
and what role and impact that's had on your business in upstate New York?
So for many years, New York State has had a movie film tax credit. In fact, last year, New York State gave in tax credits to the film industry over $400 million if you produced and made a film in New York State. The reason for that being the economic activity that takes place when the film is produced and made here in the state. And so they provided a credit as an incentive for producers to do that. So we saw that and said, Providence has got one, Louisiana has one, Illinois has one. So for theater, if they open a Broadway show in those states, they're eligible for tax credit. Well, we already have a tax credit here for the entertainment industry in our state. Why can't we do it for theater? So we lobbied with success to add on to that credit, if you will, the theatrical tax credit. So the Broadway producers open a show upstate New York, only upstate New York. They're eligible for a 25% tax credit, and it's been an extraordinary success. And what that simply means is if you bring a show, as an example, this past fall, in September and the beginning of October, On Your Feet in Buffalo, School of Rock in Rochester, Lion King in Syracuse, Color Purple in Schenectady, Love Never Dies in Utica, and Gentleman's Guide in Elmira, all spent anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks in those theaters at a time of year when those theaters aren't busy, stayed in our hotels, ate in our restaurants, and what we finally referred to is they checked the show. They built the show and put it together and rehearsed it and then performed. As an example, again, Lion King was in Syracuse for 6 weeks, relaunching its national tour and performed for 2.5 weeks. It's estimated that the economic impact of that is over $13 million. And it's really simple to see how that could happen. But it's the hotels, it's the restaurants, it's the lumber yards, it's the local stagehands, it's the jobs, the wardrobe, the security, the rent for the theater. It's on and on.
It's in their best interest.
And it's been phenomenal, a phenomenal success. And we're up for renewal. I don't think we'll have any problem getting it renewed, because it's provided exactly what we expected it to do.
So when a bill like that takes place, when you say renewal, how long a period?
Oh, this initial bill is for 4 years.
Okay.
And we'll go back in with whatever renewal they'll give us, we'll take, obviously, but we'd like to get it, in place like the film tax credit, where it just continues to renew itself. Because it's a good thing.
Sure. Can you enlighten us a little bit about what is going on with ticket brokers in the secondary ticket market? I know in sports, you see it big time in Broadway shows. But more than anything, it just feels like it's changed the consumer experience. And
you're going to need to interrupt me because I could do this for an hour.
Okay.
It's really, it's taken on a life of its own. First of all, I think it's important for everybody to, if you don't know about New York State, it's completely legal to resell a ticket in New York State at any amount you want. There was a time that New York State had a cap on how much you could resell a ticket for. First it was 10%, then it was 20%. Now it's free market. Scalping is legal in New York State. But the abuse that has taken place now with the secondary market has brought a lot of focus on it at the state legislative level. I was at a meeting both at the Senate level and the Assembly level in the last month. I'll tell you about that in a second. But to your question, there's a generation today, my kids are a good example, who think that the secondary market is the primary source of buying a ticket. They don't know about going to the box office. They don't know about going to the vendor who represents the facility.
Because that's all they've ever known.
That's all they've ever known. And so what's evolved, which has made it very dangerous, is the speculation that's taking place. Quite often now, which is where we're having a problem, tickets are available in the secondary market that aren't even available yet. And there's charging enormous prices because people are paying them. So several things have happened as a result. When you have a hot show, and by the way, it started with concerts because they were one-night events. And the ability to buy those tickets in advance of the public through something called bots, the computerized programs that jump you ahead of everybody else, which has now been found, we've passed legislation both at the state level and the federal level to make that illegal.
The bots.
The bots are illegal. Enforcing it's a whole other question, but it's illegal. And what that did in the concert business, a lot of these people would buy tickets before the public could get them. The show would be sold in 15 minutes,
Right.
and a ticket would be on the secondary market substantially. Well, the artist is not participating, the producer is not participating, the venue is not participating, the reseller is making all the money. So the same, now they found Hamilton, they found Broadway, and the same thing started to happen. So a Hamilton ticket that was $189 was now $3,000. So what some of the producers are saying is if these resellers can get this kind of a price, we're going to move the ticket prices up. So which is what all of the big shows and hot shows have done, is saying we're not going to sell a $200 ticket and let it be sold 10 times more. We're going to make it $800, which has driven some of the prices up. Just to bounce around a little bit, I was at a meeting and Assemblyman Daniel O'Donnell, Rosie O'Donnell's brother, asked the question to all the secondary sellers. He said, I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda. I created Hamilton. And Al's a producer, and he's selling the tickets, and he sold them for $200, and he pays me 10% because I created it. You guys are now selling the tickets for $2,000. How come Lynn's not getting 10% of that $1,800?
Good point.
So there's a lot of focus on it now. There's a lot of focus on the idea that they're selling tickets. Clients are selling tickets they don't even have. So we as an industry and the state is trying to, we may not be able to change the free market that's in place, but we may be able to say, you gotta put the face value of the ticket on the site. You can't sell a ticket you don't own, because that's been the single biggest problem. But as an industry, what we're concerned about is how it's driving prices up. It's great for a show that's a hot show, but if you're paying $800 to see a show, you might not see a second show when you go to Broadway. You might not go to dinner.
Right.
Several ticketing companies have come up with, Ticketmaster came up with a verified fan, which they use on the Springsteen concert with success, where you had to register in advance before you purchase the tickets. I think we will find our way to a better way, because there's now, the abuse has gotten to a point where everybody's focused on it.
So by registering before, that would eliminate bulk purchases.
Exactly, limit on the purchase. You get, once you register, they check out who you are, check out your IP address.
Right.
A lot of things, the technology is catching up to try to, never gonna get rid of it, but to try to reduce it.
Right. And what is this, these bots? Is it a software that they developed? You just go in and grab all the, as soon
And it
as
jumps
it's
ahead.
available?
I can't tell you how it works exactly, but I know the results, yeah. Now again, they're legal, but they're still being used, still being used.
Yeah, I know, a few years back, my daughter was into like One Direction or Justin Bieber,
Right.
Rihanna, trying to get tickets. Couldn't, they're sold out in minutes.
Well, one of the other issues in New York State that we're trying to address is paperless tickets too. We're the only state in the country that can't just go completely paperless. Because the secondary market doesn't, they want paper. It's easier to transfer. Mobile's harder to transfer, a paperless ticket. But I think you'll start seeing more paperless tickets. I think you'll see that kind of attention paid to managing it, so we have less and less of that. Fraudulent tickets is also a real problem. People print at home and then print them 3 or 4 times, sell them online. People think they bought a ticket from a legitimate source, come to the theater, they can't get in because it's been scanned once and they're out of luck. So we try to tell people out on the road, if you will, we work real hard at messaging. Go to the primary source, go to the box office, go to the vendor that's representing the facility, try to avoid the secondary market.
Yeah, and it gives people even more reason to get a subscription, so they're
Oh, I told you it'd be a long answer.
No, that's good. Curious, if the demand is so high, especially in New York, why wouldn't they build more theaters?
Well, the cost, the economics of building a theater, particularly in New York City, is almost prohibitive to do that and generate the kind of revenue that would justify that kind of expense. Whereas on the road, they're not-for-profit institutions and subsidized sometimes by municipalities, most often by the community. Every performing arts center, Roger, around the country is not self-sufficient on earned income. They're dependent on raising money every year from the community to stay open, whether it's events, galas, golf tournaments, donations, memberships, but they're very dependent on generating additional revenue above and beyond earned income.
I see. Yeah, I think we touched on this earlier, but all Broadway shows in some way are telling a story, right? And I'm curious from your perspective on the producing side of it, why is that important? Why are stories important in general to the masses? Why going to a musical, even going to the theater or a movie for that matter, how does that affect us? How does that entertainment piece affect us in our daily lives?
So as I've done a couple times today, I'll go to the end of the story and come back. My children grew up going to the theater, and so my daughter, who teaches theater at the Texas School for the Deaf in Austin, was a theater with my son last year, and she texted me and she said, "Your son's not the only one that cries in the theater." So what does that mean? When people go to the theater, we talked about earlier, there's an experience. And it's different for everyone. But when you have that, I remember seeing a show one time in the early stages and saying to the producer, my heart, my brain, and my soul, for the very first time in a long time, all came together and jumped across that stage while I was watching the show. It just took me right in. I felt everything. And I was just unbelievable joy. So that has to happen to have a good experience, to enjoy yourself. But it's different. Every show is different. So let's take Wicked or Lion King. That may not have, although there's a lot of emotion going on, but there's spectacle there too. People are looking around and they're excited, and they've created an event. They've created something on stage that's magical. In addition to everything else we talked about, when that happens, people want to be a part of it, and they enjoy themselves, and that's what delivers a show for a very long time, because people talk about it, they come back often. I'm not sure I really answered your question, but that's exactly what a show has to have.
Sure.
Something that has to happen. We just opened a show the other night that I'm proud to be involved with in a small way, The Band's Visit, based on a movie that was done about 10 years ago. The story of an Egyptian army band who's been commissioned to go play for the opening of the Arab Cultural Center in Israel. And they end up in the wrong town. They end up in this, instead of going to Tekla, they went to B and P, and end up in this little desert town in Israel, where there's just a woman with a cafe and a few residents, and they're stuck there overnight. And what happens to watch this Arab Egyptian band spend 24 hours with these Israelis in this little town with no hotel rooms? They split them up, two to this house, two to that house, and how they take care of each other, and how they interact, and how they become human beings. And there's a relationship that evolves because of what they're doing for each other. You don't even know that you've been there for an hour and a half without an intermission, because it's so beautiful to watch. And when that happens, it's pretty special.
Yeah, it sounds that particularly sounds fascinating. I guess that was my point, is there's these lessons, life lessons within a story that you may not even necessarily think about at the time, but as time goes on after the show, maybe things remind you of that show that teach you something. And that's nice.
And that happens. It's happening with Dear Evan Hansen, particularly happens with the smaller shows. The other thing that's important too, Roger, is that when shows entertain and they're fun, Aladdin, Mamma Mia, people escape, and they're taking place live, and so that's the other reason to be there.
Right. Yeah. So can you take us back to your childhood? I'd just love to learn a little bit more about your upbringing. What was it like growing up in your day? And
Well, io sono tutto italiano, see? You know that I can 100% Italian.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it was wonderful. First of all, I'm a child of immigrants. Both my parents were born in Italy. We spoke Italian before we spoke English, which was not uncommon in the neighborhood that I grew up in Binghamton, New York, in the 7th Ward. We never had a car until I bought one. I didn't know where Endicott was. I mean, Johnson
7 miles away.
We had very little to have so much. All of us did. We had a neighborhood that was our family. We had very little family here. My father just had one brother and cousins. But both my parents worked in factories. It's the classic American dream. They came here. They wanted a better life for themselves and then ultimately a better life for their children. And that happened. We just had so much fun and had so many wonderful friends and experiences within 4 or 5 blocks. I mean, it's amazing. We talk about, today kids want a car when they're 16 so they can take off. Well, we just went outside.
Right.
We went in the streets, we went to the park. If somebody was sick, we took care of them. I grew up on a street where one side of the street was Italians and the other side were all my black friends. And Mrs. Taylor would make cornbread and Mrs. Nocciolino would make tarals. And we'd give them to each other, there was no, my kindergarten class was 6 Italians and 6 black boys. We were all the best of friends. Yeah. One of them ended up being my roommate in college. We didn't know color. We knew friendships, we knew relationships. We were very dependent on each other. I remember speaking one time at the Women's Crusades Club, which was an organization of women from the part of Italy that made up this community center. So, I remember my mother sending me up the street every Saturday morning to sweep the sidewalk of the convent where the nuns lived, and told me not to take any money from them if Mother Superior came out. And then I would have to sweep the driveway between the 2 houses. The driveway we didn't own because we were renting, but we were taking care of us, of the place where we lived, taking care of the people. And I said out loud, for the first time, I said, whether we didn't even know it, but what we were being taught. Responsibility, community, respect. The things that we articulate now were happening by accident then because of the way we were living. I just feel so blessed that I had that kind of upbringing.
Yeah, and that's hard to, that's gone. I had a little bit of that growing up. I grew up in a Slovak neighborhood, same thing.
Right.
Mow the lawns, shovel the sidewalk.
Right.
My parents would say, don't take money.
Right.
Until you got a little bit older and you did multiple. But and I kind of feel bad for our kids that they didn't have that type of experience to be able to go across and exchange the cookies or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think it's gone because we don't spend enough time focusing on it. Or, I'm one of those guys who say history is so important. Telling a story to a young person today is important, is our responsibility, because they don't see anybody else doing it, so they need to know. I remember about 5 or 6 years ago when a new neighbors moved in next door to my house, and I woke up in the morning and I heard a noise out my driveway, and I pulled the shade up, and my next door neighbor was out with a snowblower doing my driveway. I'm like, okay, so I went out and I said, Barrett, what are you doing? He said, well, it takes me 5 minutes. I can't do yours when I do mine. I'm like, okay. Then I went in that weekend and made a marinara sauce and brought it over. He said, keep bringing the sauce, I'll keep doing it. Point is, it's still there, but we have to help nurture that. I think it's our responsibility.
You mentioned something there. You said it's important to tell the stories to our kids. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think because of what's available to young people today. Look, what I want for my children is no different than what my parents wanted for me. I want them to have a better life than I had, if possible. Sure. So we give them so much. We provide for them. They have so much more. A lot, not everybody, but the opportunity is there. And then there's television. And there's so many distractions that there's not as much time together as a family. And so what I tried to do was to tell those stories to my kids. Here's what we used to do. Here's how we did it. Here's why we did it. And with that, it's part of their life lessons, I think. And they learn. And I've been fortunate enough with my children for them to listen. They're okay because I've taken the time. We're just as much responsible for them not knowing as they are, because we have to take the time to tell them those stories and show them. and often by example, taking care of other people, taking care of your friends. And I think when that happens, not that I'm a psychologist or anything, but I think the experience for them is what they'll take and do for others. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a part of our responsibility.
And what would you say to those, I just think there's a big percentage of the population, especially young folks, that don't have that guidance, don't have that direction. They're trying to find themselves. They're trying to think about their career. Talking about your past, it sounded like you really settled in. You felt you had a passion. You found that passion in college and got right into it. How do we help those that don't have the mentors, the parents, the grandparents, the extended family?
Well, if we get the opportunity to talk to them, and I get an opportunity often to talk to young people, particularly young people who want to pursue the arts, theater in particular, and I tell them to go for it. If you have a passion, exhaust it. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid. If you want to do something that's that important to you, don't give up on it. Go try it until you figure out you don't do it well enough. Be willing to be honest with yourself, but don't be afraid to make a mistake. It's okay. It's all part of that learning experience. Look, how many mistakes have we made? But it's part of that learning experience. And so my advice is always just go for it. Work hard at it, commit to it, and if you're not good, do something else. But don't be afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah, because society pushes us, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in directions that we don't necessarily want to go with what's in our heart.
Yeah.
You found a passion and you made a business into it, and you worked hard. You worked very hard. So it's that combination.
We're all proud of our children and our families. I have 4 children, and all 4 of them are working in a profession that they went to college and studied for at the moment. They may change, but they had a passion for whether it was food, or whether it was business, or whether it was writing or theater, and they're all doing it. Because I said, just go do it.
Right.
Once again, I think we have to foster that. We're responsible for that as well. And they all have their own clock too.
You're right.
They all tick differently.
Isn't that something? It's so true.
Right.
Have there ever been any shows that you passed on that you regretted or said, I should have did that one? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure the opportunities are a lot are there, and you have to pick and choose. So,
Yeah, I mean, the producers.
really,
Yeah, I just didn't get it that day, and I've also been very high in a show and was completely wrong, where it didn't work. Afterwards it was so simple to figure out, but in the beginning, you have a different mindset. When you get the opportunity, and this speaks to my role in producing and investing, Roger, sometimes I'm at the party late. Sometimes it's because of a relationship. Sometimes it's because I know the producer and they're interested in us being involved or my being involved. But whenever I've had the opportunity to be at the beginning of the process, where I've seen the script, or I've heard the music, or I've gone to a reading, where I can experience it, that's where I've had success. Because you can feel it. You get that time.
just like your son did when he went to Hamilton.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was at a reading the other day of a new show that is going to come to Broadway potentially in a year and a half, and I just was blown away by it, particularly the first act. And if you get in the room, then and I've been in the room where I'm like, I don't think so. But yeah, it's a process, and I've made mistakes. It's what happens.
It's like anything, right? It's building relationships. It's surrounding yourself with people that respect and trust you, so you're brought to the table. And I think that goes across any industry.
It really does. The theater industry is a relatively small industry, believe it or not, and it is built on exactly that. Particularly the respect part that you mentioned and the relationships, they go a long way. They go a long way, and if you maintain them, they serve you well.
Yeah.
They serve you well.
So you probably don't want to talk about this, but 6 Tony Awards. Wow. Most people don't go to the Tony Awards and will ever have an opportunity. Can you just give us a little bit of that experience?
Yeah, it's just, well, let's go backwards again, or instead of going to the end, we'll go backwards. When I first became a Tony voter, I'll never forget it. The first show I went to see was Cats as a Tony voter. And I took a good friend of mine, Jim McCoy, was in town, so I took him with me, a friend of mine that was in the restaurant business, and I didn't like it and left at intermission. Well, the next morning I got up and I thought, oh my, this is not good. I'm a Tony voter and I didn't see the whole show. So I went back the next day and bought a ticket just to see the second act. Probably the first time I've ever admitted this. And so I became, being a Tony voter is certainly a real privilege. And with that comes seeing all the shows and the experience with that. It was long before I was involved in producing and investing. And then having been so fortunate to be involved with shows in different capacities, by the way, because I'd like to be honest about my role in each of those shows that we won the Tony Award for has been different. It's been very different. But the experience is unbelievable to be up on that stage and be part of the team, because it is a team. When it takes $16 or $18 million to produce a musical today, there's not one producer. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's what it is. And everybody plays a different role, and some play none, and some play. The role I play usually is I represent the road. And I represent a group of 40 or 50 cities around the country called the IPN, the Independent Presenters Network, which is made up of people around the country who do what I do at Performing Arts Centers. And our part of what we have been doing for many years is to participate in the development and nurturing of shows, because we need them. We need them for around the country. And so I manage that portfolio. And then of course I do my own investing and participation as well. But every experience is different, but the one for me that I like the best, I think answers your question, when a friend, a producer sends you a script and a CD with Cyndi Lauper just playing the piano with 3 songs she wrote, and you sit and you listen to it and you say, oh man, there's something here. And you call them and say, Hal, I love what you sent me, I'm in. Can I? And then the book gets developed and the rest of the score gets done, and then it gets orchestrated and the costumes are made and the process goes on. And then you win the Tony when I'm talking about Kinky Boots. And you get all your peers involved and you're right instead of wrong. And you bring 50 people along with you. That's a special, that's pretty special.
I could only imagine.
Yeah.
It's like the birth of a child.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, by the way, you are a new grandfather.
I
Congratulations.
am, for the first time, right? My Irish-Italian grandson, Seamus.
And how has that been?
That's been, it's been unbelievable. What's really been wonderful is I remember when my daughter, who has Seamus' mother, my oldest child, I remember when she was born that I had this experience that I tell people who are about to have their first child. You're going to finally get and understand the love your parents had. You think you do, you don't know till you have a child. And what's been wonderful is to watch that with her and her husband. As much as it's been beautiful to have a grandson, is to watch her become a mother,
yes,
and understand the fact that she probably killed me. I have never had a better relationship with my daughter than I do now. Not that I didn't have one
takes
before.
it to a different level.
It's taken to a different level.
Yeah. No.
And that's been beautiful, just beautiful.
great.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you'll be blessed
I hope
several
so.
times over. So, what is next for you? What's next for Albert in the future? Anything exciting to come? Anything that you see?
You know, Roger, I feel so lucky that I get to do every day something that I don't consider to be work. I'm at a place where I'm in a groove where I'd like to stay. I'm not looking to do anything different. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I want to keep going to readings and seeing new shows and being part of them and living the life in the theater that I've become part of now. And so as long as I can. It's fun, it's enjoyable, it's rewarding, it keeps my brain going, and I've been blessed. So if I can keep doing this until the day it's time for me to pack it in, I'm good.
And it sounds like you're as excited today as you were when you were 23.
Unbelievable, right? I am, yeah, I am. As I say, you know, I think if you're fortunate enough to find your way in life to doing something that you really enjoy, that's pretty special, yeah. And I have, and I do, and so I want to keep doing it.
Any advice that you would give to that 23-year-old Albert if you could go back and talk to him?
Oof, that's a great question. You know, I think probably the only thing I think I would have said is slow down a little bit. But, because I was moving a lot, which I think brought a lot of satisfaction to me. But if I could have slowed down a little bit and found a little more time for myself. But when I say that, I say to my children often, I said, you don't understand that what I do every day is really time for myself. It crosses over because it doesn't feel like work. But if I could have slowed down a little bit, because by speeding you make a lot of mistakes. Maybe that was good too, I don't know.
Sure.
But everybody needs to spend a little time, I call them timeouts. They're healthy.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And anything that you do that you could share, people love to hear success secrets. Like, do you have any practices that you do? You say take time out. I mean, it's very important. I know some people just meditate or listen to music. Is there anything that you found that's helped you?
Yes.
If you could have figured it out 20 years before, say.
I think it's important to always acknowledge people's success. Always. I still write notes. Show opens, I'll send a note to the person that's responsible. I'm real proud of you, congratulations. If I have an employee that I'm working with for the first time, or a colleague I'm working with for the first time, and they're doing something for the first time, take the time to say, well done, thank you. I find it really important to let people know that you care about them. Because if you don't, then you can't get the kind of interaction that you want. You're not entitled to the kind of respect that you want. But if you give it to them, and you show people you care about them, and by the way, it's okay to tell them they're wrong too, but you get that license when you do the other things. I think if I were talking to a bunch of young people, I would say to them, be sincere, be honest, be caring, and don't be afraid to say thank you. And I think it'll serve you well.
Yeah, great advice. So this has been wonderful.
Thank you.
We touched on a lot of topics.
I feel like we sit down with a cup of coffee.
I know, it's so
about it.
true.
It's been
It's so
fabulous.
true.
Thank you.
But before I let you go, just one last question, and that is, Albert, what would you like your legacy to be? What do you want to leave behind?
Um, hmm. That he was fair, honest, tough, and kind. Because I think that's who I am. If I were to define myself, I know I can be tough. It's what you have to do when you have your own business, but I've always been honest, sometimes to a fault. But nobody could ever say they didn't know where they stood with me or how I felt about something. I think being kind is something we just talked about when you care about other people. And fair. If you're fair, it makes it easier to do everything else. Not easier, but you have the ability to negotiate, to find your way to a situation in a business deal, for example, that you think is balanced. People give you that latitude when you've treated them that way. So I think those are all a few words that would define how I'd like to be remembered.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again
Thank
so
you.
much. This has been a pleasure, and we are going to keep up with you. We will post your website as well on the
Wonderful.
show, and would love to have you back again.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much.